Alright, in this video we're getting into what we think attracts people to the industrial Rivethead or even goth scene for that matter. This question was asked of me by a friend who follows this YouTube channel. You know who you are. So I will tell you my experience of what I think attracts people to Rivethead culture or industrial music or even goth music for that matter. My experience was from wanting to get involved in the music. I knew when I was very young, like 6 years old, I wanted to be a musician. It wasn't until much later that I started listening to, you know, darker stuff like Nine Inch Nails, and kind of when I started manifesting that being a musician and being into goth and industrial music. For a person who is outside of the scene, I think it could be the transgressive imagery, it could be the dark aspects, it could be the sound aesthetic that contains, you know, factory sounds or some kind of industrial sound, or you know, smashing steel or something like that. It could be some of the activist or political nature of some of the lyrics, or maybe even some of the visuals on the album artwork, stuff like that. It could even be some of the dystopian aspect of the lyrics and the imagery. It could be even post-apocalyptic or even post-industrial aspect, the imagery and the lyrics. If we're speaking in a more sarcastic kind of tone, in the sense of like Revolting Cocks, I would say there's a humor to some industrial like Revolting Cocks. I would even say some of Ministry's humorous, although some of it is also serious. I would say that humorous or sarcastic side of it can attract people. I don't think it's the main thing that attracts people to the industrial music scene or the goth scene. Sometimes it's just the darkness around it. Some people are drawn in because they have this fascination with darkness. In specific, the goth scene, I would say there's that fascination with darkness and the macabre and you know, graveyards and stuff like that, or other things along those lines. Sometimes it's the harshness of reality and just being able to express that on a dance floor by stomping out your anger, or, you know, expressing yourself through dancing and screaming along to song lyrics that you fucking love, that you connect with. I would also say maybe even the cut-ups and Dadaism. I know that may not be a thing these days. I see a lot of that art on Instagram, and I actually I enjoy that art. I enjoy that aspect. Granted, that's not what drew me in initially for industrial music, but I think that can be an aspect because some people come from it from a pioneering, like their first exposure to it is Throbbing Gristle. I think it's really based on the individual. I don't think there is a set way a person is attracted to the Rivethead or industrial music and goth scenes. I think it's all based on the individual, and each and every one of us has our own experiences. When I was forming and jamming in my first industrial band way back in the mid to late 90s, the reason why I was doing industrial music is, first of all, is because Nine Inch Nails at the time was my very favorite band of all time. Not that I wanted to be Trent, because I don't think we can be somebody else, but I definitely was highly inspired by him, the catalyst and gateway for me to doing industrial music. I felt like doing industrial music in the mid to late 90s when I was in my first band. I felt like it was a way to express all the complicated fucking things in life, and you know how things can get so fucking complicated, and in a way it was kind of like simplifying everything and going, okay, this is my interpretation of what's going on, and this is how I feel, and this is the way it makes me feel, and whether I like it or not, this is just how I feel. And in my teen years I was exposed to Nine Inch Nails, but I think even as a young kid, like when I was 12 and 13, I remember going through my dad's CD collection and finding Depeche Mode and listening to it and fucking loving it. Granted, I think if I remember, I can't remember what album it was. I do remember listening to People Are People, or whatever that song is called. I can't remember what it's called, but I remember listening to that and the album that was attached to, and just fucking loving it. And while it wasn't entirely industrial, I do feel it was fairly dark, and I just, I was kind of always into the dark things. Like I always watched when I was super, super young. Like I remember when I was like maybe 7 or 8, somewhere in there, I remember watching old black and white horror movies, and even as a teenager, like 15, 16, 17, 18, even up until now, like I when I was a teenager, I remember watching like tons of cyberpunk anime and cyberpunk related movies, and some horror movies, post-apocalyptic movies, The Crow, Terminator, vampire movies, stuff like that. I was always kind of attracted to that darker side. I even remember when I was super young, I think I was 12 years old, I had come across The Lost Boys. While the vampires in The Lost Boys, they're kind of these monsters. Granted, not my favorite vampire movie of all time, but I would say as a young 12-year-old child, I remember getting my hair cut into a mullet that kind of looked like David from the Lost Boys movies. Kiefer Sutherland's character, I remember doing that, having my hair cut to look like his, because I just loved that look. And there's a funny story when I was a teenager. When I was young, I remember dating this punk. I had this punk girlfriend, and I was exploring punk music and anarchism and all of that, and for some reason it didn't quite click with me, and I felt I was going a bit darker. And I remember telling her that I felt like I was going darker, and I felt like I was a dark punk, not realizing that at the time I didn't realize I was kind of goth. And I remember it was kind of funny, because after I told her that, I remember going over to my friend's place, and she left a message on my friend's message machine saying that she dumped me, because her reason was because she felt I was getting too dark. And I just, granted I was upset at the time, but after that happened, I just started not to give a fuck, and I did whatever the fuck I wanted to, and I went as dark as I wanted to with my thinking and music. I really explored my darker side. At that point, I after that whole period, actually it was around the same time, I was listening to Nine Inch Nails' Pretty Hate Machine, and I had heard Further Down the Spiral. That period of time, even though that Nine Inch Nails was not really goth at the time, I was starting to explore that side of things, and if it wasn't for Nine Inch Nails, I wouldn't have actually started exploring that darker side and things. And then somewhere in there, I started dating a witch, and that was a very short-lived relationship. And because of her, I started to listen to real goth music, and was exposed to that. And then, of course, somewhere down that line, I ended up like a half a year or a year later. I can't remember what time frame it was. Like a year later or something, I started my first industrial band. That's kind of the whole thing. I think, once again, I will say I think what attracts people to industrial music, Rivethead culture, and even goth music is, I think it's based on the individual. And I think for me it was more of wanting to be a musician and just being always kind of in the dark side of things. I'm sure some of you have very different stories, and I would love to hear your stories. So if you want, let me know what attracted you to Rivethead culture or goth music in the comment section. Would love to hear those. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you like what's on this channel, please subscribe and hit that bell notification button to be notified when the next video comes out. So see you in the next video. Fuck yeah.